Welcome back, everybody. I want, as a quick reminder to everyone, we are live streaming this and we archive it back at mediapost.com. If you have any friends back at the home office you want to ping, they can tune in and go to the front page of mediapost.com, and there'll be links to the agenda page for this event. And there you'll see our live blogging and also the live stream. And sometime later today or tomorrow morning, the videos from today will be archived back at the agenda, so you can always go back and refer to them. We wanted to sort of get down to examples. We've been talking, the theme of the show is convergence and fragmentation, but how does that really work out in actual media plans? How are these channels panning out as people are actually planning and buying media? What impact are they seeing? And what do the plans look like now? So this panel, talking out of example, is being led by an old friend of ours, Robert Aho, who is the partner at Brabender Cox. He is Brabender Cox is one of the leading agencies in DC. We know Rob from many years at our annual political marketing event that we do in January. He's also a veteran of this summit. He has done plans and helped campaigns from Vice President Mike Pence to Tom Coburn to the entire alphabet soup of the Republican Party, NRSC, NRCC, Rob Aho.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you very much. Appreciate the introduction, and yes, I apologize for last September and October, but it won't happen again until next year, so take comfort, please. What I would love to do is, since I've already been introduced, is just ask the panelists here. Lorene, why don't we start with you? Just name, agency, kind of what your background is and what the agency is all about right now.
Hi, I'm Lorene Mantell. I am the Director of Advanced TV at Cadreon, which is IPG's programmatic ad tech unit. So we're really focused on all data-driven video.
Hi, I'm Jesse Math. I'm VP of OTT and paid social at PMX Agency, now known as Forward PMX. Still getting used to that. We are a performance marketing agency, digital only, so coming at this space from that angle. Performance to us means changing behavior. So we look at the living room screen and audiences across all screens as an effective mechanism for doing just that.
Hi, I'm Sean McCormick. I'm a Senior Media Director at Harmelin Media. We are a full-service media buying agency based out of Philadelphia. My personal background is direct response, but for the last 6 years I've been doing mainly account management for Harmelin.
Great, thank you. Well, welcome. I should have recorded our pre-seminar call because I actually think that was a really solid jumping off point, so I kind of want to recreate it now if I could. Sean, can you take us?
As an agency and working with clients is, I think the big thing is you have a lot of traditional clients that run television, and they feel a little uncomfortable when you talk about data targeting and moving away from, 50% in prime and running, all over, not necessarily a demo. So the challenge from our aspect is to try to get the clients to look at it as a video plan, not necessarily a linear television plan versus a programmatic video plan, and try to look at it holistically. I think that's the main challenge that we face on the client side. I think internally we have challenges where we're siloed to an extent, right? So we have our digital team, we have our linear team, and I think a lot of people have this problems. Who handles what, and how do you divvy up the video versus the television?
Are you finding there's a common set of questions from clients as you try to have that conversation? Like, let's make this a video plan and not a TV plan?
Yeah, and I think it's kind of funny. An example is, when people run their linear television plan, they have specific day parts and all that, and we try to take that away and say, let's run, programmatically with television or data optimized. They get nervous. They want to know exactly where they're running when it comes to linear TV, which is funny to me because when you run a programmatic video campaign digitally, they could care less where you're running for the most part. You're running all over the place, but when you're on linear TV, all of a sudden they have to know exactly where you're running. I think that's a conversation we have often. It's hard to kind of get them away from that.
So it's audience first, but program first and then audience first.
Right, yeah, right.
Jesse?
Yeah, we don't touch linear budgets. So, when we talk to clients about what we do from an OTT perspective, they're generally like, "Oh, what? Like you could do that?" And from a content perspective, we talked about this before. we kind of see the other side of the story, whereas you know, in our digital buys, our advertisers are obsessive about brand safety, for example. You know, OTT, because of that more premium environment, we get a little bit more of carte blanche. You know, we had an advertiser run on CNN on Sling. I saw the spot myself, and it was in a segment about Jeff Bezos's anatomy, and you know, the advertiser was like, "This is exactly where we want to be. This is perfect." You know, so definitely a different side of the coin.
Oh boy. All right, let's move on. Lorene, can you tell us, because I know your perspective, kind of the common currency, you're doing both linear and digital as well at your shop?
Yes. So we have similar strategies to what John was talking about, where it's really an audience-first strategy. So we're kind of flipping the script to what we were the past panel was talking about, where you're basing your base buy and doing all that, your upfront buying, your GRPs, content, and then placing your audience buys. We're flipping that a little bit and making the foundation really about the audience, and then putting in traditional media on top of that, just to build incremental reach off of an audience, but making that like really the center of your plan. But to what John said too, it is interesting because with linear TV specifically, clients are very traditional in that they're used to seeing a schedule. They're used to seeing, okay, I'm going to see my spot at 8:05, and this is us. And that's not really how the data-driven strategy really works. Is where we're trying to get them to understand that regardless of where you're airing, network, day part agnostic, platform agnostic even, as long as you're reaching that right person, it shouldn't matter.
Okay, good perspective. All right, now comes the hard part, guys. This is where we actually have to do what we've been asked to do, which is kind of pop the hood on some specific plans. And I will tell you this, because I work in politics, this is an easy thing for me to ask. We can just leave the client names out of it, right? If you want to. But are there any specific kind of cross-screen plans that you guys have done recently at your shop that it's like, hey, this is really cool, I wish I had thought of that sooner, or wow, that seemed like such a great idea and what a bust it ended up being? Does anybody want to take the first crack at that?
Sure. So we most recently had a CPG client, a beauty client, that didn't have a traditional TV plan. So they came to us and wanted to say, we have a very specific audience that we're trying to reach. We don't really have anything in place as a base plan to build incremental reach off of. How do we build that media mix? And what we did was really create a strategic target. So not just an age, sex demo, but actually adding those filters, whether it's like they live in this area, they like dogs, they've purchased this in the past, using all sorts of different data sets. And then understanding where do those audiences consume the media, and then basing our media allocation mix off of that. One hiccup that kind of came into that was because all those different platforms, whether it's addressable, linear, OTT, some online video, they're all kind of on a different currency, right? So we had to try to talk to the client and the agency partners as well about looking at this more on an effective CPM and based on impressions. So taking that GRP away and kind of creating a flat, similar currency across everything.
I'm just curious, I want to tease that out a little bit. Do people's eyes glaze over on the client side for you when you start to kind of get into that conversation of like, we really need a common currency here? I mean, do they understand, and do they appreciate the drive for that? Or is it like, just figure it out, let me know how we do?
Yeah, I think it varies. A lot of different clients have different understandings and different education. So that's a lot of what we do at Cadreon too, is helping to educate both our agency partners as well as our clients on thinking a little bit differently and innovating a little bit, moving with the industry and the way that it's going. I think that on our side too, it's also hard because I think the last panelist talked a little bit about this, was planning tools. So even if we get them to understand that and they're okay with that effective CPM as the base of their currency for the plan, we might not have the planning tools exactly running that way. So how exactly do you put addressable TV into a reach curve? You know, things like that. OTT, what's the best touch point to look at that? Is it just YouTube? Is it Facebook? You know, so there's a lot of different things that I think we all have to catch up to.
Totally, yeah. I mean, as a performance digital agency, it's a really different world for us. We consider, if this is TV for a digital first world, measurement should be digital. So at the risk of
Tell us how you really feel, please.
being at the risk of being booed out of here as, you know, a heretic and a fraud, I don't honestly I care about scale, but I don't care about reach and frequency measurement. I care about outcomes, and that's how we're measuring, and so our plans are fluid, right? And the optimizations are based on outcomes. And some of the things we are able to measure as real digital outcomes, we're talking site visitation, foot traffic, footfall, on-site conversion rates. Other times and other things that are a little bit more tricky and all that, we are taking like a geo-saturation approach and measuring lift at a market level. And marketing mix becomes the vehicle for driving the most lift that you can get. But, you know, to us, talking about 95% completion rates and viewability rates in an OTT world, you know, that's table stakes, right? We're seeing path to conversion that includes, hey, someone visited my site through search, was retargeted through 10 display ads, saw a video ad on a TV screen, and then went back through brand search as the kind of experience that we're trying to deliver for clients.
Right, I think you have to, you know, each client's different, right? You manage expectations, but I think also it's looking at our media metrics and then, you know, matching them up with business goals and actual metrics, and how do you kind of bridge the gap there? And that's kind of tough, I think, especially when some clients don't want to share data. You know, others are a little better at it, but you know, if you have a client that'll share their CRM, share their sales data, it's easier to kind of bridge that. But you know, some clients are protective over their data, and you got to kind of guess for the most part.
That's always fun, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
I think that the role of the digital display planner today has shifted from managing different ad tech partners like it was, you know, 3 to 5 years ago, really understanding what's the right partner that can deliver on this goal. And it's really become a data planning game. So to answer your question more directly about planning, you know, and implementing media plans, it's how can we create a unified audience strategy that's at the core for us of performance plans. So that can be first, second, third-party data. And digital to us today, because everything that we're activating on is through a programmatic lens, and therefore, not everything, but we prefer programmatic lenses because that helps with data, that helps with measurement today, that also helps keep costs down to make it more cost-effective in a more direct response model. But it's also being applied across, right, digital display in my title is being applied across connected TV screens, desktop and mobile, digital out of home, programmatic audio, or video on programmatic audio platforms.
Yeah, I think that
Well done,
the
sneaking that in
attribution, the attribution is funny. I think to what the panel I think touched on last was, you know, you have your direct response or your attribution metrics, but then I think someone asked about what about top of the funnel, and it's really like, can that be both, or does it have to be one or the other, right? Does television or video have to be an awareness tactic or a response driver, or can it be both at the same time?
And especially if you're tying it back to the ultimate, who cares about how many points or CPMs or whatever 3-letter acronym you want? if you're driving sales or votes or, you know, anything that tie back to the business goals, that's ultimately how we should be measured, right? Okay, I want to move on here just real quick, but I'm not going to let you guys off the hook yet. I want to hear specific media plans. I do want to get into what I think would be really cool, like some of the, you know, some of the tools, maybe it's software or just other tools that you guys are using to help you talk through with clients and determine, you know, where do you put the budget? Where do the dollars actually allocate themselves based on whatever data or tools you have? But before we go there, can we talk some specifics? Can you guys take us a run through?
I think I could give kind of a specific. It's a little, I think, unique as far as, you know, we use the data optimized television platform for our one client, right? It's a retail client, mostly in Walmart. The issue was, you know, they had to run television to get their shelf space on Walmart. They said, we want a Walmart tagged spot, right? National TV. The problem is they didn't have budget for a national TV spot, and their competitor spends about 10 times as much on national TV. So what we did is we kind of created a data optimized plan and said, hey, let's take your money and be smarter with it, right? Because you're not going to beat out your competitor 10 times. You're not going to exist, right? So let's have a smart buy and be targeted on television. And what we did is we pulled, MRI, which is pretty basic stuff, right? And said, let's target these specific, and we created a targeting segment, right? And said, we're gonna take your dollars, we're gonna make them work harder for you and hit the spots that we think your competitor probably isn't, although it's not gonna be a really high impact buy. You're gonna follow, hopefully, the strategic target and the CPM is gonna be a little higher, but you're hitting the right people, hopefully, at the end of the day. And I think it was successful. Sales were good. How recent
was this, just so we know?
It's actually ongoing now, and we've done it for the past 2 years. More recently, we've paired it with a network buy, mostly because we got a little bit more budget, and because of the, this is another battle we have internally with them. They said, hey, we're not seeing our spot during, NBA games, right? And it's like, well, you only have so much to work with here. That's not the point, but if the Walmart buyer wants to see it during, an NCAA game or whatever, I think we have to cater to the client sometimes with that. But from our standpoint, we delivered all the impressions. I mean, they were concerned about impressions. They can go back to the Walmart buyer and say, "It's our national buy. We delivered 100 million impressions," right? And that's what their ultimate goal was. So it was more about optics, but we felt we hit the right eyeballs, not necessarily the most eyeballs.
That's pretty cool. All right, any other thoughts on plans before we move on? Because I do want to make sure we have enough time to talk about, how do you guys actually allocate for screens? Like, how do you go through that process? How do you walk the client side through it? And what kind of tools are you finding that are actually helpful, and which ones aren't?
So I'll do that question then. All right. So
no linear. Next question.
It's data planning for us, and so we have direct private marketplace deals directly with publishers whenever possible, and we're applying data sets again programmatically to reach them across all screens. I'm a performance marketer who wants to pay, right? I don't believe in the traditional digital direct response model that has netted out with, $5 under CPMs for bad inventory, bad ad experiences. I just fundamentally believe in the power of sight, sound, and motion, 100% share of screen, et cetera, to change behavior, right? To make customers who aren't currently your customers become your customers. I don't understand how a 300 by 250 on dictionary.com can do that. I'm sorry if anyone from dictionary.com is here today.
They're a sponsor.
I do think that I think that the line, therefore, between investing in upper funnel and performance programs is more blurred than ever. I guarantee even the EA team understands the return of investment on that upper funnel investment. If you look at the best, the campaigns of the year, the award winnings every year, the end of the case study always ends in, and revenue increased 6% year over year. So if just doing the right thing for the consumer is the thing that drives performance, well, then performance marketing needs to be able to do that as long as it is measurable and data-driven. I feel like I didn't answer your question at all, but
no, but that was riveting nonetheless. So what tools are you using?
No, so again, the problem is there are not good tools. Between YouTube, online video, and connected TV, and then furthermore, like video on demand and other things that have digital or programmatic connection points, there is no good way to plan across it. So where do you start for each individual brief? Should I do YouTube first? Should I do online video first? Should I do Sling first? I don't know if that's a really super answerable question today. And once you have your media mix, how much do you have to do of each before you move on to the next? You could spend millions on YouTube and probably not be enough, right? With billions of hours of video being consumed and uploaded daily. So again, it becomes that media mix modeling, that what's driving outcomes for me. And I care about audience and inventory. I don't really care about screen as much. So I'm happy to let my buys run across TV screens, desktop and mobile, as long as it's that inventory, that audience that my D2C advertisers couldn't get through a linear budget.
And I think it's tool-wise for us, at least, it usually still starts at MRI and maybe ComScore, and if the client has a CRM, use that and just try to find a target, and then you just go from there. I don't personally know of any other tools. I mean, Eve here from our digital team might know, but for us, it just starts with the research team and then try to narrow down on who we want to hit.
For us at Cadreon, it's really a proprietary tool because it's not really out there. We've developed our own proprietary data stack that can take in clients' first-party data if they're willing to share it, but we also have third-party data like MRI, Simmons, ComScore, online data as well. So we're really taking that all in to really inform our plan. And we are outcome-driven, so we're looking to see how that affects a business goal for that client. But I think, to your point about reach and frequency, what we're trying to do is we're still planning on reach and frequency, but we're starting to create these algorithms and noticing what does a specific reach and frequency, how does that deliver on a sales goal? So that it's about the end outcome, but you still have your media metrics on the front end as well to help inform that outcome.
Okay, that's pretty cool. I know from my perch in the political and the public affairs arena, one of the biggest complaints that I would have about my little piece of the world is that we're very, very poor at looking back and learning from the last campaign, not just political campaign, but the last ad campaign. And I think it's probably, at least in the political vertical, it's inherent because you're literally breaking apart these small businesses that are political campaigns. It's a $10 or $20 million small business that is organized for 18 months, and then it implodes, win or lose, it implodes, and everybody goes their separate ways, and it gets recreated in other worlds in the next 2 years. So that doesn't necessarily offer a really good opportunity for us to do some soul searching post-campaign, because everybody's, frankly, worrying about their next gig, right? So I'm just curious, from the non-political perspective, how much do you use the learning from the last campaign to drive the next campaign, and is that dangerous?
We try. It depends. The metrics out there are wishy-washy, right? Like, we have these benchmarking goals, right? You go off these industry benchmarking goals, but if that doesn't result in sales and you're hitting your benchmark, then what does that mean, right? It doesn't really mean anything. So we constantly try to look back at previous campaigns and test and optimize and learn and keep it moving forward. But it's tough because everything is different. Every metric that you measure, like the benchmarking goals, your cost per completed views, you're not sure what the worth of that is until you can match it up with sales data, and I think that's tough to do sometimes.
I kind of almost disagree, because I think in linear, because you're not getting that feedback loop as real time as you are in digital, a lot of it is that what we're doing is looking back on a past campaign and understanding, okay, now that we've run this cross-channel campaign that included addressable, it included OTT, included regular linear, and then also programmatic linear, what did that deliver on the outcomes, and how do we optimize that for the next campaign? And I think it's also kind of hard for linear because those results might not come back in real time. And so it's 6-8 weeks after the campaign's already done, and that's when I'm getting that measurement and that business outcome back. So that's what that's only, at that time is the only time that I can now optimize a future campaign.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it's also super important when looking back not to fall for false positives or false negatives. I've had clients who tested and said Facebook doesn't work. Media can't be the question and the answer, right? So when you look back, the learnings have to be about channel and vehicle, as well as creative, as well as audience, as well as product and site experience as well.
I loved the presentation I think we all did from Electronic Arts earlier, and it made me want to ask you guys the question, as planners and buyers, do you love being driven in some moments by a piece of creative that literally can determine how you want to take the media plan? Does that happen more and more in today's day and age? As there's more and more screens in the homes, as we consume video a lot differently than we used to 10 years ago? How does creative impact what you do with your plans?
I think it's, it's a significant impact and a little bit of a struggle sometimes because you have so many options, right? And we know that the creative is super important, and you have to have customizable creative for each one of these options, whether it's mobile, linear TV, bumper ads, all that stuff. So, if you have all of those available, I think it really helps a campaign. But in the real world, we don't have that all the time. So. I think we're getting there, and I think we work with creative agencies, right? So we don't have a creative team in house. So I think we've seen them kind of adjust a little more, whereas before it's like you get one creative, it's 30, and you just got to do it. This is what we have. But now I think you're seeing 6-second ads and things like that are customized for the content, and it's more of a natural experience.
But media is driving that, right? It's not being driven by creative.
Yeah, I think it's usually media first, then creative, at least from our standpoint.
Again, I think it works both ways. I think that there are times where there is a message that needs to go out, and we need to craft a plan to get it out. But also, brands that have really good creative can be a roadblock to brands that have good enough creative. I've had brands not want to get into the OTT space because they said that it would need to be a Super Bowl level production for them to play in that space. And there is also good enough, right? Like, not every TV spot is unbelievable either, right?
Really?
You're welcome.
I think that it's interesting to see how creative and media are starting to work together. For us, we're seeing a lot of clients that have multiple messages or multiple products within their lines of business that have different audiences that they want to speak to. So starting to build different audiences and serving them each individual creative, so dynamic creative, in both linear TV as well as programmatically. Looking at addressable and the capabilities and the technology that's advanced there, so you're able to really pinpoint a specific household and say, okay, you're going to get the Clorox message, but the household next to you is going to get a Revlon message or whatever it might be. So I think that's becoming very cool, and understanding how the audience dictates what creative they get.
Yeah, and I think going back to the Spotify presentation where people hate ads, right? Mm-hmm. But I don't think they do if it's relevant to them, right? If it's good creative and it assesses a need, I don't think they do hate them, right? It's just the clutter that they have to get through to find something that's relevant is the problem.
Good perspective. So for those of us, I think it's probably fair to say that to some varying degrees we're screen agnostic in our planning approach here, right? Probably not all at the same hardcore level of agnosticism. But I'm curious, as we're kind of in that brave new frontier, where does that philosophy break down in your media planning? Where does it start to fall apart? Because I think I'll be the first one to say it today, but not all impressions are the same, right? And we'll probably hear that 30 more times throughout the next couple of days. But so this is not a foolproof method. And how do we get around it from your perspectives?
Well, you do have to diversify. I mean, so my challenge then is, if I want to deliver these great experiences, how much am I paying for it, right? And CPM does ultimately matter, and what you're paying for matters. So even, on Facebook, you're paying for a 2-second view. On YouTube, you're paying for probably 15 seconds. And on an OTT, you're paying for 15 or 30, right? Because your completion rate's going to be there. And so now we're almost talking about like the 1990s TV planning model, where how much, like, OTT is kind of like Prime for digital, right? Where you're going to be paying more for it. No TV plan ever consisted of only Prime. So how much of each do you need now to actually make an efficient, targeted buy? And the big question for me is, what is the value of a spot in user-generated content versus a spot in Modern Family versus a spot, in between 2 paragraphs of an article? If you are reaching that audience, I do believe that there is a difference and that there is value, whether it's performance-oriented or brand association, which in the end is performance-oriented, to being in premium environments. I think we're very far away from actually quantifying how much.
Any other thoughts on that?
I think for me, A lot of where the plan breaks down in Screen Agnostic, we've sold them in on, oh, this is great, the audience is at the center, we're going to touch them at any time. Is sometimes it still gets down to that cost at the end of the day, and they see that number and they're like, well, actually, that's really expensive. So they're like, we need to think about this again, and it's helping them and finding ways to resell a business outcome, to your point. So even though it is more expensive, it's premium. What does that mean in terms of business outcome?
Yeah, I think like where's the most efficient way to hit the eyeballs, right? It's, for our one client, we had a cross-screen campaign going on locally, local news stations, and then cross-screen, their affiliate websites. And when we realized we could hit those same people more effectively with just a traditional digital video buy. So, we just added cross-screen in there just to say, hey, we're gonna try it. But really, we just hit them, we're gonna hit those same people more efficiently, then that's what we did. So we ended up, canceling out the cross-screen portion of that, running linear TV and digital video instead.
I would say it's also really important as buyers, or if you're a client, to hold your buyers accountable to what you are buying, right? A lot of connected TV or OTT can be things, not that there's anything wrong with it, but, the Fail Nations of the world, the cat, 24/7 cats, my personal favorite, but maybe not where all my brands want to be, So, I think it's very important to maintain transparency in your buys in terms of owning those relationships yourself and knowing exactly what you're buying, what you're paying for it, and where it's going, because there are a lot of options out there that is relatively long tail, and again, there's value to all of it. But we shouldn't fool ourselves in terms of what we're buying just because we are on TV screens.
Really good points. So I'm going to open this up for questions, I think, Steve, if that's okay with you. Really good perspectives up here. It does kind of feel like, in large part, especially on the connected TV OTT world, we're kind of laying the tracks right before the freight train gets to it, and then pulling the tracks that we just ran on and putting those in front too. So really good perspective from all three of you. Thank you.
So hey, it's Josh Martin again from Performix. Just a quick question and more comment, I guess. But you guys referenced reach frequency, and I think it was Jesse that mentioned he doesn't factor that in to a great detail. But if you're thinking about a sales cycle or something that requires immediacy, let's say a hurry up sale, doesn't reach and frequency become so paramount to get that message out in a very quick way, in a significant way? And I think reach is paramount from that perspective.
Yeah, I care about scale for sure, and it will vary by industry. I mean, I have CPG clients that have household reach goals, so not to discount that, but I would rather have strong delivery against an in-market data set that I've tested into. So a lot of the post-campaign learnings that we have are, across data providers and data sets and audience, and which one we are seeing those post-exposure metrics from. But I care less about how many households did I reach necessarily, and more about, hey, I have, a multi-million household audience that's in market for back-to-school supplies. Am I delivering strongly against that in-market audience, and are we seeing outcomes from that?
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with that. I mean, I think it's great to have reach and even scale, but are you converting those people, right? Are you hitting the right people? So I think that's probably the most important.
My friend might disagree, actually. So.
And I think that's also a difficulty, right? Because of managing reach frequency. So even if you've been able to do this and you have a cross-screen plan, are you overexposing that audience because they've seen it on linear and they've seen it 7 times on OTT within the same program? So starting to make all of that work together and harmonize is also difficult to figure out.
I guess a follow-up with that, you guys were talking and Robert was mentioning pitfalls and successes. I guess if you plan against the wrong audience in your environment, that could really lead to bad plans and bad business results, I imagine.
Yeah. No, I'm very conscious of not guessing wrong also, and so by maintaining control, by trading internally, and I also should caveat, like, there is a time and a place for not buying programmatically everything, right, through private marketplaces, but the tools that we use internally allow us to diversify audiences, measure and optimize without overpaying for it. So I totally agree. Don't guess and don't guess wrong, but whether that applies to a single audience set, third-party data set, or your persona that's based off of loosey-goosey, third-party data, that risk exists in all channels and all of media.
Yeah, I think you'd be shocked at how many times in the political space the wrong audience is bought. And it's never acknowledged that they are targeting the wrong audience with the wrong creative, and they're just throwing hundreds of thousands of dollars down that rabbit hole. But anyway, I digress.
I think we try to lean on our clients for that as well. At least we do. It's like, if we think this is the right audience, but you guys know best for the most part. You have a CRM, give us the data that you have. I think that's important.
Yeah. That's why I can't wait, honestly, for the further decline of the upfronts. I mean, I want to commit I want to commit, I don't eat shrimp, but things like Google Preferred and things like that, and YouTube, I want to maintain flexibility to understand what's working and to shift. There's room to make deals across a portfolio of clients. It doesn't have to be TV oriented. We have them with the likes of, Meredith and Conde. You can have deals of volume and scale. But I don't want to lock my dollars into a certain thing, a certain audience, or a certain inventory source without, that inflates my cost. Potentially, and removes my flexibility to optimize.
Jesse wins the Summit Most Likely to Kill TV award.
My background is in TV planning.
You'll take it.
Any other questions, or should we wrap here, Steve?
We're going to wrap and move this over to the round table at the end of the morning. But Rob, panel, thanks very much. That was very sweet. We've been talking all morning about moving away from campaign-specific, medium-specific, and even demo-specific campaigning into really a people-directed and people-based approach. And how do you really walk that walk, especially in a large organization, one of the major holding companies? And we have an old friend of ours, John Steyer, who's the Chief Research Officer at Omnicom, to talk to us about the data they're already seeing in his research about where the eyeballs are moving, where that people-based consumption of media is moving, but also the ways internally they're trying to implement a tool set that can communicate across the agencies and also with clients about how to follow those eyeballs. Please welcome back John Steyer.
Thank you. And is this lav mic working? Cool, so I can stand wherever. Hopefully you won't all find this too inside baseball boring, but what I'm going to do is walk you through actually a version of the presentation that I've been running around the last couple of weeks, delivering to a whole bunch of teams in our 3 media agencies at Omnicom, OMD, PhD, and Hearts and Science, about a product stack that we're really trying to get up and running and diffused throughout the organization. And it's super early days for this, so a lot of it is more the aspirational story that you would tell 10,000 of your closest friends and family to try to get them all moving in the right direction. It's also a little bit TV-centric in that the perspective that we're trying to shift is away from the old school paradigm of linear TV and toward an integrated view of the video landscape. And with those caveats, I'm just going to start hopping through it here. Hello. Clicky click. Yay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about TV in transition, just sort of where the industry is and what direction we're moving. I'll get into some research my team did a couple years ago with Hearts and Science called The Unreachables that gets to the point that I think Jesse made in the last panel about, there are CPG clients who are obsessed with reach, and what do you do about that? Thinking about the notion of stacking of video viewership, our journey in picking a platform and trying to cobble together a way to address the needs in the marketplace, the way we look at data at the core of that platform, some of the components, and then a couple of early glimpses of how people are using this practically in the field from sort of an internal alpha that we've been going through the last year or so. So shocking, I'm sure, to everyone in this room, TV is changing. New distribution models have shifted things really far, and kind of other folks have had slides like this. I'm not going to go into it too far. The good news, as we tell the story to my colleagues, is there's some technology and data finally coming to market to start to put all the pieces back together. And it's, as I said, early days, but at least the trend is our friend, right? The way I characterize the main shift, though, is one from TV as a content-first medium and media generally as being content-first. And we sort of forget now, 25 years into the digital world, depending on what you count as the beginning, that the audience-first world that we're used to today, where you can actually define targets that aren't age, gender demos and use data, cookies, or whatever to go find those people, use ad servers to go find them independent of the content that they're in. That's all different than the way it used to be. The way it used to be is the ads were burned into the content streams, and it was measured by the magical panel of people who would formerly judiciously write down every time they were watching something on TV, and more recently would precisely press a button every time they entered or left the room to make sure that their demographic representativeness got counted in the panel that scales up to everybody. And it was an age, gender, demo world, and everything was easy. Well, I still have people in my company who buy as if that were how all of media worked today, and that, it's challenging. And we're teaching them carefully and thoughtfully and bringing everybody along for the ride, because that's sort of how we generally do it. And trying to get them to understand that in the world where content and ads being separated and deliverable by different streaming servers, you need to look at delivering or measuring against actual delivery. And we're still not very good at that as an industry. And I think there's some folks talking tomorrow about OTT measurement, so I'm not going to steal their thunder. A challenge that hopefully they'll deal with is the good news about that proxy measurement world is it did have actual humans in it. And the problem with the impressions that we talk about measuring today is that they mostly don't have people in them. Important to remember, the term impression came from the early days of digital media, where it was a reasonable assumption that people were consuming on a personal device, right? It was a computer, and then it was a mobile phone, and then tablet. We kind of fudged a little bit, but now that 70% of OTT, I think it's maybe even in the 80s now, is being delivered directly to TV sets, co-viewing is a problem. It's one where there's literally no direct measurement in the marketplace right now. So see me after class if you want to talk about how to make that better. That's what I've been saying in my presentations. Anyway, so we can do measurement against precise targets, maybe not as precisely as we like, but at least we're moving there. So I mentioned we did some research a couple years ago now, used a survey because it was the only way to actually get to people, and talked to, in this survey, just millennials and Gen Xers. So I think at the time it was people who were 37 and down, 18 to 37 or something like that. Now they're, the under 40s would be a reasonable way to think about these people. And what we found was that about a third of their TV viewership or video viewership was captured in the Nielsen TV currency based on the combination of ad load, device, and delivery period in which that measurement happens, and that there was about another 5 hours of TV content on other devices that for whatever reason wasn't captured in the currency. Now, not to say that it's not measured somehow, because there were metrics for all that stuff, but not part of the currency. And then there was another 15 hours of streaming content across all devices that didn't show up either. And while things have moved a little bit closer in the last couple years to capturing this stuff, I would say the problem of getting a third of total video viewership for a very substantial chunk of people is problematic, because you don't really know where the other 2/3 is, and certainly the metrics for each of these individually, you don't understand how they overlap. And the other challenge we had was that 47% of the people in our survey said that they watch no Nielsen-measured television whatsoever, and we didn't ask the question that way, but we asked all these different buckets, and they literally reported no viewership in that top left-hand corner where the currency operates. And again, the takeaway from that, to my mind, is that there are people who are abandoning linear TV as a method of viewing video altogether, and that no unmeasured combination of trying to chase the half of those that are still watching and the half that aren't using traditional measurement is going to get you there. You need to start to understand who's doing what. So measuring, as I said in the content versus audience first slide, the who's doing what, not just the bulk count of how many are doing something. Another nice way to look at this is linear television ratings measured by the currency over 12 to 13 to 17, 18 from blue to red. If you look at everyone together, 18 to 49, which is the left-hand side, it looks like 5% a year attrition, no big deal. But if you look at the 18 to 24 bucket, it held sort of constant over 12, 13 to 13, 14, and then has been falling off a cliff. It's dropping about 11% a year. And that actually syncs up pretty well if you look at that one and the one next to it with the unreachable stuff that we talked about a minute ago. This is actually measured by that magic button pushing currency. So, even you're going to see this no matter where you look at it. And the only way you get to an average is to add it all up together, right? So someone said earlier that we're still doing okay in terms of reach against older demographics. That's declining too. And again, I think the important thing to note is not, is this the same people viewing less? But to remember that in many cases, it's people who are shifting all of their viewing to a different mechanism, and that the traditional forecasting reach overlap between media in a world that's changing this fast, probably, random duplication models are probably not getting you the right channel allocations anymore. That's my big takeaway. So another even shorter term period to look at this against, this is a slide that NBC gave us. Just looking at the stacking of video delivery across NBC Prime content, 18 to 49 only. And you can see just from 17-18 to 18-19, significant attrition in that bottom bucket, which is live and same-day viewing. DVR holding steady, VOD holding steady. All of that viewing basically went to OTT, and thereby causing a 52% year-over-year increase in OTT viewing, again, of like versus like content. And so, again, I would say the thing to think about is how the same people are watching, not whether they're gone. So how do you tie that back together? Well, you start with a framework that lets you move the entire agency's plumbing into that audience-based world. And that doesn't mean that sometimes you don't want to transact on broad audiences, right? Adults 18 to 49 is an audience defined by fairly broad demographic parameters, but heavy fast food buyers or luxury car intenders or whatever are narrower, and you can keep whittling it down as is appropriate. The way you get to that is by having a single set of plumbing that lets you see people across all of the different phases of creative and media plan execution. And so that's all linked together by our notion of Agile ID. It's basically the plumbing, a common identity framework that lets us look at an audience-based way across everything. And the platform that I'm talking about today is just the TV piece of that puzzle. So how did we get to the specific platform that we're rolling out? Well, about 2 years ago, I led, with a couple of my colleagues, an assessment of pretty much everything that was happening in the advanced TV space. And we said, is there a solution out there that's right, not for campaign level, but that we could adopt as part of our plumbing across the entire holding company? And so, we looked at the network group offerings, which were all sort of coming out at that time. And, I think all the networks have done a really good job of making a lot of, especially their fringe programming and the long tail stuff that was never measured properly in a pure Nielsen ratings world, available to more granular audiences. But, it created a bunch of walled gardens problem. OpenAP started to solve for that, but never in a way that we felt address the needs of a large agency level. So we still make investment across all these different guys, but none of them was the right solution for our agency plumbing. So we said, okay, now we're going to go look at all the advanced TV platforms in the marketplace, and the ones still around from that bucket were Videology, now part of Amobi, TubeMogul, now part of Adobe, Simulmedia, 4C. All of them had different levels of technology in several of the cases, completely solid platforms for doing what we needed to do. The challenge being that all of them, to some extent, though 4C less so than the others, really were focused on delivering to the marketplace, at least at the time, as ad networks. And so they were going out and acquiring inventory, a lot of which was inventory we can buy just as easily as they can at prices typically better than they were able to get it just by sheer force of scale. And typically, though again, not always, these platform as a service companies were not always offering full transparency on the delivery side, sometimes based on their vendor relationships. Now, that landscape has changed significantly just in the last 2 years as these have become more mainstream. But again, I feel comfortable with our assessment that none of these tools was the right one for us to adopt. The direction that we did ultimately go is partnering with a company called VideoAmp, who I heard mentioned earlier today, based in Santa Monica. I actually met them at this conference 3 years ago. So thank you, MediaPost. And our goal, and again, this is just the big vision slide, is to be able to take that same client and audience targeting data from first or third-party sources, from viewership, whatever, to push it through planning, optimization, allocation, and measurement across all three of the buckets of what we would call addressable TV. So looking at IPTV being the relatively easy one and the focus of a lot of the conversation here, but also not forgetting our household addressable friends who, between what the folks at Modi are doing and what one-to-one at Cadent is doing and NCC and Xandr are at least making it easier to do what was formerly really annoying and difficult, which is to execute household addressable plans across, again, we buy nationally, so we want to be able to see all of it together. And then the data-driven linear piece, which is really the emerging spot in the marketplace. How do you use that first and third-party data to drive index-based or other forms of still broadcast buying, and to be able to tie all that together. Just a little ambition, right? So we're headed in that direction. The only way you get there is with a foundation of household-level television data that lets you see with some reasonable resolution TV activity data. And for now, the platform is powered by a combination of Vizio Inscape's ACR data and set-top box data from Frontier, and I'm going to talk in a second about why we've got both of those. I think the ambition is to bring in as many different data sources as we can over time and to work with anybody who's willing to make this data available literally only for the purpose of keeping our clients happy, to the point of, is there ever going to be a currency around this stuff? I sure hope so, but we decided we can't wait for that to happen. So we're figuring out a way to get a reasonable proxy for delivery level exposure data at a household level. And part of combining the set-top and ACR data, this is a topic very near and dear to my heart, having worked as a set-top box data nerd for about 10 years before joining Omnicom 3 years ago at TiVo, and before that at AT&T, is that what's awesome about ACR data and what's awesome about set-top box data are almost exactly complementary. So set-top boxes, you typically pick up all the TVs in the household, but you don't see anything that wasn't on cable, which means you don't see non-cable or satellite households. You don't see any OTT or other kinds of on-demand programming. Anything that's not delivered through the set-top box, you're not getting it, no broadcast, et cetera. On the other hand, in a smart TV ACR data world, you can potentially see, with some limitations, all of those different inventory sources, but you only see them across the number of TVs in a household that are reporting to you and across only the households that have that particular brand. Now it happens, Vizio has a fairly decent national footprint that is easily statistically correctable to be nationally representative. The TVs per household thing, there's some clever math you can do around that, but having the two data sets available to sort of calibrate each other is really nice. And then all that's missing is the panel that lets you tie those deliveries to humans. Again, see me after class. So when you wrap all that together, how does this platform story work? Well, you take your first and third party data, you match your IDs to your TV households, you use that to build behavioral indices, you create plans at a couple of different points in the process, and I'll talk about that in a minute, that focus on where those audiences are and away from where they aren't. And then you measure performance by taking, again, that household level delivery data and linking it back to other data sets using whatever KPIs you have, or in the case of TuneIn, as Julie pointed out earlier. TuneIn's awesome because the performance data set comes right along with the TV viewership data. But in any case, the goal is to try to get a complete loop here as best you can do it. And so we're deploying that to the marketplace by essentially 5 different products that we're offering within this advanced TV platform. And where we're focused right now is starting with the 2 on the top. So putting in place a cross-screen measurement framework that works by either log level or tag-based delivery measurement on the digital side, combined with the household level delivery data on the linear TV side, and using that to just start to get a view of deduplicated reach and frequency across the currency measured and non-currency measured video buckets, for lack of a better way to describe it. And we're only really focused on campaign delivery there, but we found that doing this in our own platform was at least as good as any of the solutions in the marketplace and less expensive at scale. Now, again, would I love there to be a fantastic third-party solution here? Yes, our Nielsen and Comscore are both very much headed in that direction and rolling out products. Sure, we're doing this for now. We'll do whatever is the best thing available later. The other piece is to take that slide we just talked about and start with essentially linear TV planning. So use the high-level understanding of where audiences are for our different clients and products across different channels, networks, day parts, all that stuff, and use that as we go into the upfronts to just focus their upfront buys more precisely on the places that their actual audiences are. And to go from there to then, because most of our clients are giant companies with multiple brands, to go one level deeper, which is to allocate their upfront purchased inventory using the more advanced targeting data and start to put together plans that have a little bit better focus on being in the right place with the right message at the right time. And from there, to further enhance by measuring essentially where there are gaps in delivery or things that we can't reach through those traditional buckets, and supplement that by API-based TV transactions, what some people would call programmatic TV, whether those are direct integrations with the network groups or whether it is from other digital sources, wherever we can get it. So again, remember, very aspirational chart. This is what we're trying to get to. Not that many inventory sources hooked up yet. Not everything available for measurement, but we feel like this is the way to go. And then finally, over on the left in the little red bubble, is the TV digital segments, which is using television behavior to create targetable segments on the digital side and trying to use that for again, reach frequency augmentation, or in some cases even suppression. So we know that these places indexed really, really highly on delivery to our target on linear TV. We're gonna not go there when we buy other stuff. So this just documents the idea for how the linear planning works. So you find your 3 targets, you do your allocation, basic Venn diagram. Wouldn't it be awesome if you could focus a little bit better this way across a lot of dollars? Makes a big difference. On the linear allocation side, again, it's taking that same data set and just using it to split networks, day parts, whatever, across brands and products appropriately. Nothing rocket scientific here, you just gotta do it. And people have been doing this in less advanced and less data-driven ways for a long time. It's part of the art of media planning historically, and this just brings some hard data science to the party. On the API-based transaction side, it's literally trying to hook up the pipes in order to enable us to start buying around that linear delivery. That's the early committed bulk using data through direct interaction. And again, super early days in doing this, but one of the lovely side effects of the networks all banding together for their own audience-based sales efforts in that open AP world is they actually have plumbing that is starting to enable this stuff now. Again, super early days, but we've gone from none to a couple, and I'm hoping that continues to move forward. And what it gets you to on the cross-screen measurement side is an understanding of what is that overlap between linear reach and digital reach, and how can I take my 47% reach that my client believes is 90% reach because it's, 53% because 47% are watching no linear TV. Your 90% of 53% is only 46%, which is not 90%, which if your bonus was based on a 90% reach goal means you're probably doing something wrong. At least here's a way to figure out how to understand the overlap and how to get the other folks. So, the goal in implementing the measurement is it actually does, and people have asked me, like, why are you talking about measurement first? Shouldn't we talk about targeting first? And the reality is, if you implement the measurement first, it lets you see holistically how your delivery has been going already, and then you can start to steer investment across all of your properties the right way. And it's why the gaping hole in the marketplace of cross-screen measurement implemented at scale is, it's a great opportunity for companies trying to sell you incremental reach that they can't prove is incremental reach, but probably not great if you're spending a lot of money on marketing. All right, any questions before I go on about what we're doing? Yes, ma'am. Hold on. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I can also talk about the case studies first, so.
Okay. Hi, I'm Julie Anson Magna. Without giving too much away about my own version of the deck, because John and I have had a similar 2-year journey, and he also likes that I ask questions, so this is okay. In your own thought process and vetting of the entire new fancy word of 2019, Lumascape, what about your choices led you to bringing in a third-party platform to power an internal system versus building it yourself?
That's a great question. And in fact, coming from a software and data company before Omnicom, my first pitch was, hey, shouldn't we just build this ourselves? And though Omnicom certainly has done that, and we're sort of doing it with Omni, it's a similar approach where we're tying together the best-in-breed stuff from outside. And I think our concern was literally about being able to hire enough of the right people fast enough and keep them focused on building it internally versus working with a company that conveniently for us was in the midst of a transition from being a video DSP to wanting to learn more about linear TV at the same time that we were trying to make linear TV look more like digital. So part of it was luck and just finding a couple of partners with VideoAmp, and honestly 4C was sort of in the same place at the same time, who kind of wanted to go on the same journey we were going on anyway, and it helped make it easier to justify the cost and allay internal fears about being able to do development ourselves. So literally, big company being smart about what it does well.
Jonathan, quite an indictment on our most sanctified currency in our industry. If I looked at the numbers correct, Nielsen is currently measuring only about 20% of activity, according to that.
No. As much, at least a third. And again, to be precise, in the currency, right? So it's not that the other stuff doesn't get measured elsewhere. And our goal in that unreachable story was much more to focus people on looking at the holistic problem than to beat up Nielsen's methodology.
No. So my question is, Nielsen's linear measurement system is not perfect either. It only measures, I think on any given day, only 70% of its huts and putts are attributable to a viewing source because they're not able to report it. Some of it's baked into on-demand in other places. So my question for you is, in your method, what is your actual coverage? How much of your universe is dark versus lit?
I can't answer that question right now. That's a calibration that we're working on today.
Well, is it better than what Nielsen is doing?
It depends very precisely what you look at. So the way I would say generally, I mean, people like to beat up on Nielsen, but we should really be beating up on ourselves for believing that the thing that we use as the currency is also the truth. And that was never true, right? I mean, there's always been, to your point, deficiency in any measurement system has places that it works better than others and a level of error associated with its measurement methodology. It's too early days for us to talk about where exactly we are in that calibration with these data sets. We literally aren't even in production with the merged ACR and set-top box data yet, but the data point to that being a good solution and a much better one if I can get a couple more ACR data sources and a couple more set-top box data sources. So I guess I'll defer an answer to maybe a year or two from now when I have those numbers. The story we're telling today, and I'll talk about this in my conclusion, it's a parallel path story anyway. So you don't have to believe these numbers at the currency level because we're not asking anybody to trade on it today necessarily.
Hi, how are you? So I'm Nadine McHugh. I'm from L'Oreal. Nice to meet you. And
Nice to
I
meet you.
applaud you for taking such initiative because it's definitely needed. Question is, and it kind of ladders back to what you just said about methodology. There are a lot of different factions, I guess, if you will, out there trying to solve for this. And it feels like we need an industry solution. Now, I don't know what your thoughts are on that, and I know, the more people you get into consensus, the longer it takes to do something. But you just said 24 months, so I would think that, I know the MRC is looking at standard impressions. There's a lot of talk about this. So what's your take on incorporating all of that so we can have a system-wide approach?
That's a great question. So I literally, and check my bio, have spent about the last 15 years trying to make an industry-wide solution as a nerd running around trying to convince people how to do it with best available data and technology. And I think then I took this job and was both happy about the opportunity that it created and also understood much more why I had never been able to sell any of those other solutions, however good they were. Because people didn't understand what I was talking about. And literally, I figured out in about month 7 at my job that everyone had just been nodding their heads when I was talking, and they had absolutely no idea what I was talking about when I would talk about granular TV measurement data, because it just had never been a thing that anyone cared about. So the reason I've adopted the approach of trying to start with the clients and the marketplace and with the education, and as I said, this is the story we're taking out to our own teams and our own clients, is to get them to understand that the world has changed and demand that there is an industry-wide solution for it. Because I think what happens otherwise, absent demand and absent demand with urgency associated with it, what you end up with is 97 people in a room trying to get consensus on something that they're never going to agree about. So this is very much a better is the enemy of the good way to implement that. And part of what I do is literally try to go around to all of the people who could supply data into this and talk to the MRC. I'm happy to talk to or work with anybody who wants to get to this, but I feel like if I can't drive that from the demand side, then none of that matters. Yeah, okay. So just, these are super quick. This is actually the biggest deployment that we've done. It was one of our large companies over the last year who just wanted to figure out whether it was their first foray into using first-party data. And they said, if we actually have this level of understanding of our clients and of our customers, rather, is there a way that we can get to a more efficient distribution of our dollars across the segments that we care about while maintaining our spend constant? So they weren't even necessarily looking to pull money out, but they were looking for how much money they could pull out if they wanted to and not ruin their delivery against GRPs or against their new target. So and this was not in a self-service platform. There was a bunch of manual intervention required, but the idea was literally to take their last year versus this year data and say, could we do a little bit better if we looked at it against our baseline plans against our optimized targets. And we were able to get about 120 index across almost all their audiences on broadcast prime while holding spend constant. And we were able to do even better across most of cable with only a small hit to 18 to 49 GRPs in total, and again, keep the spend constant. So, in this case, it's significant over delivery against audiences they cared about without having to spend more dollars. The other, and this is more of a wireframey story that is also a work in progress, is an identity linked stack to get to that ability to fill in what under delivery on the linear side with data that comes from data and inventory that comes from other places. So NBCU has driven much harder and at scale than anybody else I've seen in the marketplace, trying to move both toward new ways of measuring and toward the ability to offer direct API connectivity to their inventory, again, under limited circumstances for very small use cases with them controlling the pricing, but at least moving in the direction of it being automated all the way through. And so we're in the midst now of doing a linkage of the Inscape IDs with delivery data on the freewheel side to be able to get an understanding of delivery across NBCU inventory, and then using that same LiveRamp-based linkage in the future, we will be able to link to any other inventory providers willing to identify the same way. So again, this is early days, just getting the pipes connected, but it's at least folks who are willing to get the pipes set up and let us connect them and see what happens next. So where does this all go? Where are we? Implementation's continuing. We are, as we go to market, putting together our investment partnerships. Fortune favors those who provide data and inventory together, I think is our approach. We're trying to get all of our people bottom up and top down at the same time, familiar in this language prior to the upfronts, and that is an audacious goal, but literally, learning is repetition, so getting it in front of people once and having it in context and in their brains as they're thinking about it should hopefully help. We're trying to get everyone to touch this over the next couple months, but we look at it as totally a parallel process for this year with a goal toward hopefully moving this to become the normal way of thinking in 2021 or maybe a year later, but I don't want to be under aggressive because otherwise it won't move at all. Anyway, that's all I got. I'll be
Thank you so much, John. That was great, John. Thank you. We're going to, I'm going to let you take join John at one of the roundtables before we have any, so if you have any follow-up questions for him. Before we break to roundtables, let me ask our cruise director, Julie, do we have any announcements for activities?
What's ironic is our event manager is Julie, and she's outside. Yeah, so anyway. I do. So listen very closely here. We have 3 sets of shuttles that are going to be leaving today. If you're playing golf, the shuttle will leave at 1:50. You'll have plenty of time to have lunch, enjoy our wonderful presentation from Beeswax, change, and then get to the shuttle. That's 1:50. The shuttle for golf will also return back, I believe it's 5:30. And then if you're playing later than that, then you'll need to arrange your own rides back. For the hike, the Camelback hike, that's 2 p.m. out at the lobby. And horseback riding is 2:50.